You awaken in a confined, airless room that reeks of sweat, fear, and olive oil. The stone walls press coldly against your bare skin, and in the distance, you hear laughter drifting from the main house, the kind of laughter that sends a wave of dread curling in your gut. Your body throbs from the abuse of the night before, bruises blossoming in shades of violet and gold across your ribs like twisted petals. The iron cuff around your ankle has abraded the skin to the point of bleeding, and when you shift, dry flakes of blood fall away. Approaching footsteps echo heavy sandals clacking on marble. You recognize the sound instantly. It's the overseer, arriving to ready you for another day of what they euphemistically call service. Your hands tremble as you fumble for the thin tunic crumpled in the corner. You're 15, though you stopped marking birthdays the day they brought you here. Time flows differently when you're owned. The door groans open, metal grinding against stone, and searing sunlight floods the room. You squint, lifting a shaky hand to block the glare. The overseer fills the frame, a towering figure of muscle and scar tissue, his face etched with the cruelty of years spent crushing young spirits. "Clean yourself," he barks, throwing a wet cloth at your feet. "The master's expecting company tonight, important guests, and you." His eyes sweep over your form with the detached scrutiny of a livestock appraiser. "You'll be helping to entertain them." Your throat tightens. You understand all too well what that means. You've known since that first night when they tore you, screaming and flailing, from your village. When they told you your family's debt had been cleared with the only currency left to offer, you. This was life for countless adolescent boys in ancient Greece. Not the polished version recited in schoolbooks where philosophy and democracy shine so brightly. They obscure the darker realities behind white marble columns and eloquent debates. Behind the symposiums and rhetorical arguments was a brutal system that devoured the defenseless and tossed aside their humanity like shards of clay. Before we delve further into these buried histories of endurance and torment, if you appreciate unearthing the concealed corners of the past, consider liking and subscribing for more content like this. And please, drop a comment below, letting me know where in the world you're listening from. It amazes me that we can explore these ancient stories together, connected across continents and centuries by our mutual hunger for truth. The selection began long before you grasped what was unfolding. Maybe your family was indebted to a rich landowner. Maybe warriors raided your town during one of the endless Greek wars. Or maybe you were merely born beautiful in a world where beauty was something to be captured and sold. In the scattered hamlets of the Greek countryside, families survived by a thread. A failed crop, a wounded father, or a sudden death could send a household spiraling into debt. And when the creditors finally came, they had no interest in promises or future repayment. They demanded compensation in flesh. Imagine a modest farming village tucked away in a valley lined with olive trees. The homes are humble, built of sun-baked mud and straw, with earthen floors and single-room spaces where whole families huddle together at night for warmth. Children scurry unclothed between the dwellings, their laughter mingling with the bleats of goats and the rhythmic thump of women grinding grain. Life is difficult, but it's still life. Then the drought arrives, relentless weeks of scorching sun baking the land. The gnarled ancient olive trees yield only shriveled remnants. The barley fields crisp into dry, crackling husks. Wells that had quenched the village's thirst for generations begin to falter. Families face impossible decisions, ones no parent should ever confront. First go the animals, the goats and sheep that are the family's only tangible assets. Next, the heirlooms, the cherished items handed down through generations. When even those are gone, they begin to look at their children differently. The slavers arrive like predators circling a dying prey. They set up shop in the village square, ropes and chains coiled like sleeping serpents, ledgers thick with names and values. They offer quick silver for long-term servitude, 20 years of labor in exchange for enough money to keep a household fed through the freezing months. It sounds practical, even merciful, when your children's ribs are showing through their skin. But you're 12. You can't comprehend the cruel arithmetic of despair. All you know is that your father avoids your gaze as he haggles over your worth, and your mother turns her back when the merchant inspects your teeth like your livestock. You feel coarse hands prodding your limbs, weighing your strength. You hear words like promising, strong lineage, and ideal for domestic work, though you don't yet grasp what any of it means. The slaver drops a handful of silver coins into your father's hand. The metal glints in the sun, each coin a silent marker of another year of your life. Your father's hands tremble as he accepts them, but he accepts them all the same. Your mother covers her face and weeps, but she doesn't stop what's happening. They assure you it's only for a while, that you'll return one day, wealthy enough to purchase your own fields, perhaps even start a family. They promise kindness, education, opportunity. Their lies drip like honey from shattered combs, sweet on the tongue, but laced with venom. The trip to the city is a torment of sore feet and iron collars. You've become part of a human procession, dozens of boys and teens shackled together by rusted chains and silent misery. The older boys keep quiet. They've learned that hope is just another flavor of heartbreak. The younger ones sob for their mothers until their voices vanish, or until the guards silence them with fists and lashes. You march through terrain that would be breathtaking under different circumstances. Rolling hills blanketed with olive groves, coastal paths where the sea shimmers like scattered gemstones, mountain passes where eagles glide on the wind, but none of it registers. Your universe has narrowed to the length of chain linking you to the boy ahead of you, to the rhythm of weary footsteps on hard stone, to the growing certainty that you'll never set eyes on your home again. At night, they tether you to iron stakes hammered into the dirt. You lie curled on your side in the cold earth, listening to the muffled sobbing of the other boys, the iron collar digging into your neck like a symbol of doom. Occasionally, the traders bring visitors to assess their inventory, men with manicured hands and calculating stares, who move among you like ranchers evaluating livestock. They prod your limbs, inspect for illness or wounds, and judge your viability for different kinds of service. You begin to recognize the patterns, to categorize the buyers. The plantation masters search for strength and stamina. They want boys tough enough to labor in the fields from sunrise to sunset. The household elites look for different traits: obedience, intelligence, a certain softness that suggests you'll follow orders without question. But then there's a third group, and you quickly learn to fear their presence most. These men arrive in elegant garments, speaking with refined voices. They reek of expensive colognes and imported wine, their fingers heavy with ornate rings. When they examine you, their hands linger in ways that send shivers down your spine. They're searching for something precise, a mix of youthful beauty and innocence, not for work, but for indulgence. The slave market in Athens bombards every sense. The noise hits first, a cacophony of voices shouting, arguing, begging, commanding. Then the stench, bodies unwashed for weeks, sweat soaked into skin, acrid fear, and something more foul you can't identify, but which twists your stomach. Then you see it, and the older boy's warning suddenly makes sense. Rows of naked bodies arranged like wares, toddlers clinging to their mothers, their eyes wide with incomprehension, elderly men bent with age and despair, their worth reduced to the dregs of their strength. And everywhere, the buyers prowling, gesturing, talking about prices as though the people before them are deaf to their words. They scrub and oil you before the sale, not out of concern, but because polished bodies draw higher bids. The oil catches the light, accentuating the lean build you've developed during the march. Someone's judged you too attractive for field labor, so you're grouped with those marked for domestic roles, the ones intended for service inside grand homes. The auctioneer's voice cuts across the square as he details your features, your years, your place of birth, your physical condition. He mentions your pleasant appearance and calm demeanor, coded phrases that prompt a few men in the crowd to lean forward, suddenly interested. The bidding begins modestly, but escalates quickly as more buyers enter the fray. You remain frozen on the platform, doing everything you can to retreat inward, to vanish from sight, while unfamiliar hands assess your body. One prees open your mouth to inspect your teeth. Another tests your grip. A third strokes your hair, murmuring about its softness and color. You're no longer human, you're merchandise, subject to inspection and appraisal. The man who wins the bid is named Lysander, though you won't know that until later. All you notice now is his satisfied smirk as he hands over the silver, his gaze already claiming you before the sale is finalized. He's well into middle age and clearly well-fed, his hands untouched by any labor. His robe is fine silk, dyed a royal purple that shouts wealth and importance. When his eyes lock onto you, something in his expression makes every instinct scream for escape, even as the chains hold you firmly in place. Lysander owns a sprawling estate in Athens' affluent district. His residence dwarfs your entire village. Marble pillars, painted frescoes, intricate tilework showing gods and heroes in vibrant color. Servants hurry down the corridors with trays of food and goblets of wine, their steps brisk and tense. You notice many of them are young men, each attractive in different ways, each wearing that same hollow expression of quiet defeat you're beginning to understand all too well. The man who takes custody of you from Lysander is Demetrius. He was once a slave himself, purchased young and elevated through a combination of cunning and cruelty. Now he oversees the household staff with absolute authority, possessing an intimate understanding of how to crush willpower and enforce obedience. As he escorts you through the estate, he lays out the rules. You'll be fed twice daily porridge in the morning, bread and olives by night. You'll receive clean garments once per week. You'll bathe only when told, eat only when permitted, sleep only when ordered. You are to speak only when addressed. You must never meet a free person's gaze directly. You are to obey every command regardless of what it entails. And then he delivers the part that chills your blood. Your duty is to serve the master and his visitors in any way they desire. This may include serving drinks, delivering meals, tidying rooms, or offering entertainment. The specifics of this entertainment, Demetrius adds with a twisted grin, will reveal themselves soon enough. Some slaves, he says, attempt to resist in the beginning, but defiance only brings suffering. Submission, however, can come with perks, improved food, a slightly warmer bed, even the possibility of small personal items. Your assigned quarters lie beneath the house, a row of cramped cells where male slaves are kept. Each room has a straw-filled mattress, a thin blanket, and a chamber pot. The walls are thick stone, deliberately designed to silence the cries within. It doesn't take long for you to understand why. The other slaves receive you with a blend of compassion and caution. There's Marcus, a boy close to your age who's endured 2 years in this place. His eyes carry a depth of suffering that feels impossible for someone so young. Then there's Alexios, older, his body marked by scars, who speaks to you in hushed tones about the special guests that visit the estate and what they truly seek from the so-called entertainment. And finally, there's Philemon, barely 14, but his face is etched with the weight of someone far older. He once belonged to a modest merchant family until his father's business collapsed and creditors took everything, including his children. Philemon has spent half a year in the house, and it's he who tells you what actually happens during the symposiums. In Greek tradition, the symposium was celebrated an elegant gathering where learned men discussed philosophy, politics, and the arts. These were refined events, intellectual exchanges among the most brilliant minds of antiquity, or at least that's the image passed down through history. The truth, especially when the wine flowed freely and boundaries loosened, was far darker. The guests often demanded more personal forms of amusement. Slaves were expected to offer not only food and drink but their own bodies. The very thinkers who spent their days debating ethics and virtue felt no shame exploiting young slaves for pleasure once night fell. The same men who wrote eloquent verses about nobility and love treated living people as disposable playthings to be used, then cast aside. Philemon speaks of the preparation rituals with a voice stripped of emotion, as though describing someone else's pain. The slaves are bathed and rubbed in oil until their skin shines. They're dressed in special tunics, sheer garments that cling to their shapes, made more to allure than to cover. Sometimes they're adorned with gold bangles or necklaces, signs that they're meant to be decorative, not functional. The symposium always starts with formalities. The guests lounge on cushioned couches arranged in a circle, exchanging thoughts on current affairs as slaves fill their cups and lay out intricate dishes. Topics might include the ideals of democracy, the musings of Socrates, or news from the front lines of war. These are cultured, well-educated men who take pride in their erudition. But as the night wears on and the wine dulls their restraint, the atmosphere begins to change. Intellectual dialogue gives way to crass amusements. Polite stories transform into vulgar jokes. What began as scholarly discussion turns into a contest of egos, and the slaves, until then quietly serving in the periphery, suddenly become the main spectacle. It always starts subtly. Pour more wine for this gentleman. Rub that one's shoulders. Feed grapes to the man reclined by the corner. On the surface, these seem harmless, but you quickly learn to interpret the cues, the way the room goes quiet when you draw near, the touches that linger just a second too long, the hungry eyes that follow your movements with unsettling intent. The first time you're chosen for what they call special service, you're too inexperienced to grasp what's about to unfold. A guest, a man old enough to be your grandfather, invites you to sit beside him on his couch. He says he wants to share wine with you, to hear about your village, to learn about your family. At first, his questions sound gentle. Where did you grow up? Do you miss your home? Are you being treated fairly? His hand lands on your shoulder as he speaks, then begins its slow descent to your lower back. You attempt to shift away, but his grip tightens. Around you, the other guests fall silent, their attention fixed on the unfolding entertainment. What follows etches itself into your memory with the sharpness only trauma can leave behind. Your pleas ignored, your resistance greeted with laughter, the crushing helplessness as unfamiliar hands hold you down, your garments torn away, and your childhood stolen in the most horrific way imaginable. Later, you lie on your straw mattress, staring blankly at the stone ceiling, struggling to comprehend how such cruelty can exist in the world. Your body throbs with pain, but it's nothing compared to the emotional devastation. You're no longer a human being. You're a thing. A disposable amusement for men who compose verses about virtue and the soul's beauty. And this is just the beginning. In the months that follow, you discover that what happened that night is considered tame within these walls. Certain guests have specific sadistic tastes, calculated torments they relish. Others seem to compete over who can most completely destroy a slave's will. The overseer fuels this cruelty, knowing that a broken spirit is an obedient one. You come to realize that the household runs on a layered structure of abuse. The newest captives endure the harshest treatment, fresh bodies to feed the guests' appetites. If you survive long enough, you might be reassigned perhaps as a personal attendant to a less violent master, or to the kitchens where guest contact is minimal. But to reach such roles, survival alone isn't enough. You must relinquish every shred of pride, embracing your own degradation. A few try to resist. Marcus made a run for it in his first month, only to be dragged back and beaten so viciously he limped for weeks. Alexios once defied a deeply dehumanizing command and was punished by being chained in the courtyard for 3 days, without food or shelter, a living warning to the rest. But resistance, you learn, wears many faces. Some retreat so far into themselves, they become like ghosts, physically present, but emotionally erased. Others cultivate a sharp sense of foresight, reading moods, dodging cruelty through careful deference and calculated submission. And then there are the fortunate few, those who escape not through rebellion, but through death, illness, wounds, or the crushing weight of despair become exits from this nightmare. In the end, dying becomes the only act of freedom left. You've witnessed fellow slaves simply stop eating, stop responding, stop caring whether they survived or not. The overseers rarely mourn such losses. Replacements are easy to find, with a constant stream of young captives flooding the slave markets. The methods used to dismantle a slave's spirit are as cunning as they are brutal. Isolation ranks among the most effective tools. You're stripped from everyone who ever knew you, left to exist among others just as powerless, just as broken. Fellow slaves may offer a shred of empathy, but not safety, certainly not hope. Uncertainty is another blade they wield. You're never warned when you'll be summoned, what will be demanded of you, or how harsh the consequences might be for even a small misstep. That ever-present unpredictability corrodes resistance better than any whip ever could, creating a simmering terror that never fully subsides. But perhaps the most devastating method is the calculated destruction of self. They strip you of your name and replace it with something more exotic, more fitting for their tongue. They forbid you from speaking your native dialect or practicing your family's traditions. They force you into their garments, feed you their cuisine, and require worship of their gods. Bit by bit, they erase every piece of your identity until you're nothing but a hollow shell shaped by their culture. Those who frequent Lysander's home belong to Athens' highest tiers, affluent merchants, officials, scholars, and revered artists, men immortalized in history books as architects of human progress. Yet, within the private walls of this estate, they abandon their masks and reveal appetites that would disgust their admirers. There's Dionysius, a famed politician celebrated for his stirring speeches on justice and civic ethics. In public, he extols the values of fairness and citizenship, but behind closed doors, he revels in degrading young slaves, forcing them into shameful acts while quoting Homer with perverse glee. Then Cleomenes, a generous patron of public projects, lauded for his benevolence to the needy. Beneath that facade lies a sadist who leaves bodies bruised and minds shattered. He calls his brutality a lesson, claiming pain teaches people their place in the social hierarchy. Most chilling is Sophist, a philosopher who pens elaborate essays on morality and the virtuous life. His doctrines champion discipline, virtue, and reverence for divine order. Yet once wine softens his speech and emboldens his cruelty, he transforms into a beast, using intellectual arguments to justify horrors beyond imagining. To these men, there is no contradiction. Slaves, in their eyes, inhabit a different ethical realm. The virtues of fairness and decency apply only among peers. They believe a man can show kindness to fellow citizens, uphold justice in public life, and still brutalize his slaves without a flicker of guilt. This ethical blindness is woven into the fabric of Greek society, the same civilization that gave the world timeless beauty. Revolutionary ideas and political innovations also institutionalized the total erasure of certain human lives. It wasn't an oversight. It was a foundational design. The leisure that allowed free citizens to pursue art and scholarship was erected on the toil of others. As months stretch into years, you craft survival tactics unimaginable to your younger self. You learn to decipher the slightest shift in a guest's mood. You figure out which gestures earn small rewards and which unleash punishment. You perfect psychological dissociation, outwardly compliant, while withdrawing deep into your mind, shielding your spirit from harm. But surviving exacts a toll. Every compromise chips away at your core. Every submission reinforces the harsh message: you are powerless, worthless, disposable. The boy who once laughed among olive trees is gone, leaving behind a hollow-eyed young man, drifting through existence like a specter. Your fellow captives become your only kin, united by shared trauma and subtle solidarity. You invent a silent language of glances and gesture secret signals to warn or console without alerting Demetrius. You share scraps of food, take turns watching during scarce moments of rest, and embrace each other when nightmares hit too hard to face alone. Yet even these connections are compromised by the system that forged them. Competition for small favors can turn comrades into betrayers. A fleeting promise of better treatment might tempt someone to report an escape plot or snitch on a friend's minor violation. Bonds that preserve your sanity can also become tools of oppression. Some nights, lying on your straw mattress in darkness, you search for your mother's face in memory, but the image fades, replaced by visions of tormentors. You strain to recall your father's voice, but it's muffled by the guests' laughter and the cries of fellow slaves. Your past recedes like a dream half forgotten. While the nightmare of your present stretches endlessly ahead, abuse here is relentless and varied. Some guests favor psychological brutality, subtle, invisible wounds that burrow into the spirit. Others employ brutal force fists, whips, or heated iron branding their so-called property. And some relish elaborately cruel rituals that mix physical pain with sexual degradation. But it's the banality of cruelty that destroys you most. A master might pause mid-discourse on philosophy to strike a slave simply because he's bored. Another might cut short his recitation of poetry to demand more humiliating acts. The violence isn't driven by hatred or passion, it's as routine as pouring wine or lighting lamps. Over time, the slaves learn to treat their bodies as foreign vessels that carry their mind, but no longer belong to them. You train yourself to float above your body during the worst moments, watching your own suffering from a distance, as if it were happening to someone else. It's a form of survival, but one that exacts a toll. A growing detachment from your humanity, mirroring the way your captors perceive you. By the start of your second year in the house, you notice transformations that run deeper than your external injuries. Your voice is changed duller, more cautious, stripped of the mountain lilt that once marked your origins. Even the way you move is different, stooped shoulders, eyes fixed on the floor, shaped by the understanding that attention brings pain. Worse are the shifts in your thoughts. You start instinctively reading the moods and desires of free men, even those who pose no direct threat. You flinch at sudden sounds or gestures. You find yourself thankful for crumbs, a second slice of bread, a night free from summoning, a master who ignores rather than harms. This is the system's cruelest achievement, conditioning slaves not just to obey, but to internalize their servitude so fully that the idea of resistance feels unimaginable. The masters no longer need constant oversight. Their victims have learned to monitor themselves. Still, within this machinery of degradation, small acts of rebellion endure. Slaves find ways to retain shreds of selfhood and pride. They exchange stories of their native lands, preserving memories their owners wish to erase. From scraps, they fashion hidden expressions, carvings tucked into cracks, tunes hummed too softly for gods to hear, poems whispered in forbidden tongues. Most critically, they remember. In quiet corners, they recount their pain, affirm each other's truths, and speak the names of the dead, ensuring that the lost are not entirely forgotten. They document abuses in secret, preserving testimonies that the wider world refuses to see. This remembering becomes resistance. In affirming their personhood and pain, they challenge the lie that paints them as willing property or passive instruments of pleasure. They hold on to the hope, however faint, that someday someone might hear their words and believe them. But such defiance is dangerous. Speaking one's native tongue might lead to mutilation. Sharing food or kindness can trigger separation or sale to even harsher households. The very gestures that protect humanity also invite retaliation designed to crush it. The house itself seems complicit more than a setting. It becomes a silent participant. Its polished halls carry the echoes of countless broken lives. Its lavish art conceals dark chambers where horror unfolds nightly. Beauty and brutality exist side by side, capturing the contradiction of a society built on refined cruelty. By the third year, something inside you fractures, something you didn't even know was still intact. It happens during an unusually extravagant symposium, held to commemorate a recent military conquest. The guest list is longer than usual, their revelry more unrestrained, their cruelty taking on a twisted creativity. You're presented to a group of young nobles, barely older than yourself, but already intoxicated by privilege and fermented wine. They've invented a game, a contest to provoke the most entertaining responses from their living toys. Each command they issue is more degrading than the last, and they score each humiliation like gamblers throwing dice. As you endure their grotesque spectacle, a profound change occurs in your mind. You no longer view yourself as a person suffering injustice. You begin to believe what they believe, that you are merely a thing, existing to amuse. The last fragile thread tying you to the shepherd boy who once ran through sunlit hills finally snaps. This death of identity brings a strange peace. With no dignity left to protect, no hope to hold on to, surrender becomes painless. You turn into what they desire, a flawless servant, reading needs before they're spoken, submitting without thought, surviving without feeling. The overseers notice. They respond with rewards, finer garments, more consistent meals, a cell that includes a view. Other slaves regard you with mixed emotions, part admiration, part dread. They recognize what you've become and the terrible cost that transformation demanded. Yet even in your emotional vacancy, a flicker of awareness lingers. You watch the household's operations with the cold detachment of a spectator at a well-rehearsed performance. You begin to discern patterns in guest behavior, the ebb and flow of abuse, the seasonal rhythms of indulgence. Slowly, you come to understand the machinery of pain that sustains the house. This place survives on a constant influx of fresh victims. Young slaves rarely endure more than a few years, used up, broken, or simply too old to attract interest. Many perish from untreated illness or injuries. Some are sold off to labor camps or fighting schools once they lose their appeal. A few vanish without explanation, never spoken of again. To meet demand, Lysander's household makes frequent trips to the slave markets. Sometimes you go along, now serving as a showcase of successful conditioning. The irony is sharp. The trembling child once priced like cattle now participates in the appraisal of others. You study the frightened faces of new captives without emotion. When Demetria seeks your opinion on a boy's potential, you respond clinically. That one is likely to resist too much effort to break. The other is already damaged, a poor investment. This one, however, might endure long enough to be useful. The third is assessed as having potential for extended use. The new captives look at you with pleading eyes, mistaking your endurance for a sign that survival is possible. What they don't realize is that survival and living are not the same. They don't see that the person before them died long ago, leaving behind only a functioning shell, trained to obey. On one trip to the slave market, you come across a boy who reminds you painfully of your younger self. Dark hair, frightened eyes, and a silent plea for kindness in a suddenly cruel world. He appears to be around 13, undersized but wiry, with the resilience of someone raised on labor and modest meals. Something stirs deep within your emotional emptiness as you look at him. For a fleeting second, you remember what it meant to feel human. The shock is so intense that you stumble, prompting Demetrius to grab your arm and ask if you're unwell. You lie, blaming the heat, though the truth runs deeper. That boy has awakened something you believed long extinguished, not quite hope, but a painful awareness that the person you used to be mattered, that the life taken from you had meaning, even if no one else acknowledged it. The boy is sold to another estate, sparing you the agony of witnessing his unraveling, yet his face lingers in your mind for days. He haunts your dreams with images you thought lost. Your mother at the hearth, your father's laughter, the feel of wind in your hair as you raced through the mountain fields of home. These memories are dangerous. They threaten the protective numbness that allows you to keep functioning. But they also whisper that beneath the obedient mask, pieces of your real self still exist. The question is whether those fragments are worth guarding, or if it would be kinder to let them fade away. An answer begins to take shape during another evening gathering, one quieter than most. The attendees are older, more serious philosophers and statesmen deep in discussion on the concept of justice and the nature of an ideal society. You serve wine as they argue, cloaked in your usual invisibility. They're dissecting the works of a famed thinker, debating whether moral virtue is innate or learned. One insists that certain people are born to serve, their inferior souls unsuited for autonomy. Another believes that character is shaped by surroundings, that even those in bondage might show virtue under better conditions. The irony is unbearable. These are the same men who abuse children and brutalize the weak, now discussing morality, while you, their victim, stand silently holding their goblets. They preach justice even as they enact its opposite. They dream of utopia while ensuring hell for those beneath them. But in listening, you come to an essential understanding. Their refined intellect doesn't mitigate their brutality, it amplifies it. These aren't ignorant men acting from impulse. They are educated minds who comprehend the evil of their actions and still choose to do harm. They're not naive barbarians acting on impulse. They are educated men who have methodically justified their savagery. This revelation brings a cold kind of clarity. You see now that the system isn't born of ignorance or ancient backwardness. It's crafted through conscious choices by those fully aware of their moral failings. The exquisite art, the lofty philosophical dialogues, the innovations in governance, none of these signal ethical advancement. They're simply expressions of culture that coexist seamlessly with limitless brutality. Years slip by in this lucid despair. You refine the discipline of silent service, moving through the estate like a shadow that materializes only when required. You witness newcomers arrive, their resistance eroded bit by bit. You recognize the recurring pattern of abuse and exploitation. Observe the steady flow of honorable men who discard their virtues the moment they step through Lysander's doors. At night, you sometimes stare out through your tiny window at the same constellations you once watched, lying on your family's rooftop. You wonder if your parents still live, whether they ever speak of the son they sacrificed for survival. You imagine your siblings now, adults, perhaps with children of their own, passing along tales of the brother who vanished in their childhood. These reflections no longer sting. They drift through your mind like faint melodies, poignant yet detached from your reality. You've trained yourself to feel them without yearning. It's a type of mindfulness, a way of remembering without needing. The end arrives without spectacle. You're perhaps 25, though time has become irrelevant here, counted not in years but in the weight of suffering. Your body bears the long-term damage of relentless abuse, poorly healed wounds, stiff joints, a lingering cough that suggests your lungs are failing. What matters more is that your value has diminished. The guests who once argued over your services now barely register your presence. New slaves, young, flawless, emotionally intact, now draw the attention, making your robotic obedience seem dull rather than desirable. You've become what all slaves eventually do, invisible in a quieter, lonelier way. Not desired, just forgotten. One morning, Demetrius calls you to his chamber. He tells you that you're being transferred to a mountain mining facility. It's not framed as punishment, nor as reward, just a matter of finance. Your entertainment worth has dropped below your upkeep costs, yet your body is still capable of physical labor. The mines are a death sentence in slow motion. Everyone knows it, including you. The labor crushes the body, the environment poisons it. Life there is measured in months, not years. It's not a formal execution, but it offers no path to life either. You accept the news with the same numb detachment that has defined your being for so long. Death in the mines or slow death in the villa, what's the difference? You've long since ceased to exist in any way that mattered. Biological death feels like a formality. But as you prepare for relocation, something unexpected occurs. Marcus, the boy who entered the house around the same time as you, approaches you in your cell one final night. Against all odds, he survived and even managed to carve out a stable role, working as a personal attendant to Lysander's wife. The labor is lighter, the abuse less frequent, and meals more consistent. He presses something into your palm, a small metal shard, sharpened crudely to a point. It's simple, but lethal. It could be used to unlock a door or open a vein. He doesn't speak, but the message is clear. You have agency in how your story concludes. That night, you lie awake clutching the shard, weighing your options. Escape is one improbable, almost impossible, with consequences too horrific to contemplate. You could lash out, finally taking revenge on those who've dehumanized you, knowing full well it would end in your death. Or you could take your own life, choosing the terms of your departure rather than leaving it in their hands. Each path tempts you. Flight holds the illusion of liberation, brief though it would be. Violence promises a fleeting sense of power, a final blow against a world that broke you. Suicide offers something rarer, control a final gesture of defiance against a life defined by servitude. But as the sun begins to rise, you make another decision. You conceal the shard in a place where other slaves might find it. You accept that your tale is nearly over, but others remain unwritten. Maybe, just maybe, one of them will carry it to a different ending. The journey to the mines winds through landscapes thick with forgotten memories. You pass over ridgelines that remind you of your childhood explorations, cross streams where you once caught fish with bare hands. You glimpse remote villages that could have been your own, filled with families that might still include those who remember you. You don't run. The iron around your limbs would make it pointless, and the guards are veterans of containing desperation. Instead, you let the journey become a farewell. You watch the eagles glide above and recall how you once longed to soar with them. You smell the wildflowers and are transported to your mother's garden. You listen to the wind brushing pine branches, and in it, hear echoes of your father's voice. The mining camp is worse than you dared imagine. Hundreds of souls toil in conditions that make your former life seem almost merciful. The shafts are treacherously narrow and unstable, collapsing without warning. The air is choked with fine dust that rips through your lungs and blurs your sight. Daily quotas are brutal, designed to squeeze every last breath from broken bodies. And yet, even here in this lowest realm of existence, you encounter something extraordinary. The slaves have built their own culture, a fragile but fierce network of resistance and solidarity. They share food when they can, take turns aiding those too frail to stand, and operate an intricate web of communication spanning the entire site. But above all, they remember. During stolen moments of rest, in murmured exchanges far from the ears of overseers, they recount their former lives, naming relatives, describing ancestral rituals, preserving languages their captors have tried to erase. In doing so, they validate one another's humanity, something their owners never acknowledged. Your story, too, becomes part of this oral tapestry. The boy from a mountain village, sold into bondage to settle a family's debts. The youth who survived years of unthinkable abuse in a household of privilege. The man who, even when dead inside, chose to pass on a sliver of hope. In the end, it's not violence that takes you, just fatigue. Your lungs, ruined by dust and exertion, finally fail. Your body, already worn thin by beatings and starvation, gives way after one cave-in too many. You die quietly, in the dark, surrounded by others who vow to speak your name and keep your story alive. But that isn't truly the end. Stories like yours don't simply vanish. They echo across time, passed through whispered memory, where authority dares not listen. They remind us that behind every monument, every civilized advancement, lie nameless victims whose agony made them possible. The ancient world, so often praised for its intellectual and artistic achievements, stood on a bedrock of suffering so widespread and deliberate that we still struggle to grasp its scale. The same society that birthed democracy, drama, and reason also institutionalized brutal dehumanization. These aren't historical contradictions, they're interwoven truths. And if we face reality, we must admit that the pattern continues. Today's injustices are merely cloaked in complexity. Legal jargon and economic systems may obscure the cruelty, but the foundation is unchanged. The powerful still extract from the powerless. Societies still cushion themselves with the broken backs of the vulnerable, and the innocent still vanish into mechanisms designed to erase them while the rest of us pretend not to notice. In our era, children are bought and sold for exploitation while we debate theoretical ethics. Drug empires rise from addiction epidemics fueled by the same companies funding mental health research. Tools built to educate and connect are twisted into instruments of manipulation, preying on the young and defenseless. The same selective morality that let Athenian scholars brutalize slaves while musing about justice allows modern consumers to purchase goods made by exploited children while claiming to support human rights. The same self-deception that enabled philosophers to rationalize cruelty enables today's leaders to ignore abuse while delivering speeches on progress. We tell ourselves we've moved beyond barbarism, but cruelty hasn't disappeared. It's simply evolved. The machinery has grown more sophisticated. The rationalizations grow more intricate. The victims become more remote from those reaping the benefits of their pain, but the core exchange remains unchanged. Some lives are sacrificed so others can enjoy ease, wealth, or entertainment. The ancient Greek symposiums, where enslaved children were brutalized for amusement, have modern parallels in industries that commodify youth, in digital platforms that exacerbate teenage mental health crises, in economic systems that treat people as disposable assets. The costumes change, the tools evolve, but the readiness to abandon the vulnerable for the powerful's comfort persists across eras. What's most unsettling is the way today's institutions, like those of antiquity, cloak exploitation in intellectual sophistication. Legal systems shroud ethical violations in bureaucratic complexity. Economic models lend scholarly legitimacy to inhumanity. Advances in technology serve as convenient distractions from our collective ethical failures. We craft profound literature while ignoring harsh realities. We compose moving lyrics while children are consumed by abuse. We build dazzling technologies while letting algorithmic design fuel mental collapse in the youngest users. We engage in polished ethical debate even as fundamental rights are violated daily on our behalf. The boy whose life this narrative followed died nameless in a remote mine, his suffering never documented in history books. His story erased by those who found it inconvenient, but his pain still reverberates through the voices of every person ever reduced to an object for another's gain. Even now, as you read this, another child somewhere is being traded to settle a family's desperation. Another teen is being dismantled by systems fine-tuned to exploit vulnerability. Another innocent is realizing that the pillars of their society were built not on virtue but on concealed brutality. Their tales remain in progress. Their voices still cry out for attention, for remembrance, for affirmation that their lives matter. The question isn't if this happens. It does relentlessly, pervasively, in plain view, shielded only by our collective indifference. The real question is whether we will perpetuate the ancient habit of moral blindness, relishing the fruits of structural cruelty, while insisting on our own righteousness. Whether we'll continue to spin myths of human progress, while entire lives are destroyed out of sight, beneath the gleaming surface of civilization. Or whether we will finally accept the truth that the comforts of our world were purchased by those given no choice. That the boy in the mine perished for the same reason countless children do today, because society excels at justifying the monstrous when it is convenient. The marble corridors still echo with his cries. The elaborate mosaics still conceal the stains of sacrificed innocence. And somewhere in our sleek cities, in our prestigious boardrooms and institutions, the same ancient cruelties persist, cloaked in modern form. Because evil doesn't vanish, it adapts. We are their reflection, just as they mirror us. The only separation is the era, and history has never curbed human brutality, only provided justification for erasing its memory.